side of the pond, the big finale.
Yeah, the season finale. 39th episode.
Yeah.
We've been at this a while now.
It's we've got a full season in the books. He is DJ Schweitzer. I'm Jeremy Lance.
Hello.
Yeah, we're here to wrap things up for the season of the EPL. We also got a little MLS action, and we gotta talk some NBC and just what they've done. But yeah, we got a lot going on. We're gonna wrap up the season. We are going to go down top to bottom, check out all the teams, where they finished, what went right, what went wrong, who was their only decent player.
Mm-hmm. For some teams, if they had any.
If they had any.
Yeah.
There is one team that top goal scorer had 4 goals.
Excellent.
Top goal scorer,
best,
4 goals.
This is the best league in the world.
Of course, there was also, a club that had 2 guys that combined for 52 goals.
Yeah, which paced quite a few teams in the league.
It's about half.
Yeah. I feel like we should probably just walk down the table. It's finalized now.
Yeah,
we know who the champions are. We know who's going down.
I think we all know what's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's happening.
Yeah.
But I guess really the only thing we don't know now is who our third promoted side is going to be.
Yeah. So that's still to be determined. That'll be figured out, in the next couple of days?
Yeah.
We'll actually know who's going to win the promotional playoffs from the championship. We do know the first 2 sides that are coming up, of course.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Leicester and Burnley.
Yeah, so Burnley, the midget club, are making their way back to the Premier League, and we get to look forward to them. And hopefully they'll have a longer stay up than they did last time around. But a club of their tiny resources, I would imagine we'll probably put them at the top of the list of people to be relegated next year.
Yeah, probably.
Probably so.
Hey, good for them.
Yeah. It'll be fun to have you guys around.
And we can get into it another time, but it appears that the manager at Burnley is the hot name right now. So, while Burnley might not be long for the Premier League.
Yeah. Yeah, so Burnley's manager, Sean Dyche, D-Y-C-H-E, Dyche.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, we're showing our professionalism here. Top class stuff.
Show me a pronunciation key, maybe.
Yeah. Come on, Google, help me out a little bit. But either way, he's been referred to as the English Mourinho, which I'm not sure if that's a compliment or if that's a slander.
Is that a commentary on the way he dresses?
It may be. He's a ginger like you, so.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, I guess you would be on his side then. So, but you're right. He is kind of the hot name. He may end up sticking around, maybe even jumping to a new Premier League team before the season even starts. His name's been linked to quite a few of the positions in the Premier League, so we'll see how that kind of goes. But we know the rest of the story as far as the Premier League goes. Aside from who it's actually going to be that comes up, we know everyone that's going down. We know where everyone finished at the top of the table, where they finished in the middle of the table. So like you said, let's do kind of a rundown of everyone in the league. And I think it's fair to start with the team that's all the way at the top.
Yeah.
The team that finished on top of the heap at the long run at the end of the Premier League season, Manchester City.
Manchester City, Manuel Pellegrini, who we just watched his little interview on the screen here, did not realize how closely he resembles how most people portray either Ebenezer Scrooge or Jacob Marley, the dead guy that meets him in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty dead ringer.
He's an old spirit.
Yeah, he is an old spirit. He's been around the game forever. Had a load of success in South America. He's Chilean. You don't see a whole lot of guys from Chile popping up, on that side of the planet.
No.
Especially in high-ranking positions running, mega clubs. And he's done a lot with smaller teams in Europe.
Sure.
He made his name at Villarreal. That's probably the place where he made the most waves. A really tiny club in Spain. Everyone knows who they are. The Yellow Submarines, the all-yellow kits. But but no one really gets that they play in a stadium that seats under 20,000 people, and that the fact that they made it all the way to the Champions League semifinals on the back of Pellegrini is an achievement in itself. So this is actually his first trophy in Europe, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Well, and first year in, and snatches that bad boy.
Yeah, he was able to kind of settle a team that Roberto Mancini hadn't really been able to control.
No, you're talking about last year, a side that finished second place, yet they were in some sort of disarray at the end there. They looked all out of sorts, and Mancini was the guy that took the fall on that one.
Yeah, and I think he probably deserved to take the fall on that, based on the fact that a side that's been constructed using pretty much £1 billion.
Apparently too much money.
Yeah,
financial fair play has stepped in on them.
Yeah, and they are going to get smacked up a little bit for that, and that's something we can talk about here in just a minute. But he has been able to reel all that talent in, and he's thinned out the squad and brought in some complementary pieces that along the way played really big roles. Guys like Negredo, who really didn't do much at the end of the year, was very instrumental for them at the beginning of the season.
Oh, yeah.
So they brought in a lot of the right pieces, and I think Pellegrini had a lot to do with that.
We'll point out they sealed it today with a 2-0 win over West Ham. Nasri Company with the goals. The three guys that really brought this team to where they were this season, Aguero,
Yep.
Dzeko, and Yaya Toure,
Yeah.
with a 20-goal season.
Yeah, only the second midfielder ever in the Premier League era to score 20 goals, the other being your favorite man, Frank Lampard.
Not Steven Gerrard, huh?
No, Gerrard's never quite hit the 20-goal mark. Yeah.
I thought him and Lampard were the same guy.
Yeah,
Oh.
pretty much. I don't know about you, but Yaya was my player of the season. As good as Suarez was, as prolific as he was, he went pretty cold at the end of the year. Yaya, while he had kind of his streaky plays, when he was on his game, he completely controlled matches, in an essence from box to box, in a way that Suarez can't really do in the role that he plays. So he would probably be my overall best player of the season, although, Suarez, obviously there's an argument there too.
So I guess looking forward now, we'll look to the future with Man City this offseason. Champions for the second time in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about this. The financial fair play is apparently going to be slapping them.
Yeah.
How hard? Not that hard.
Not as hard as PSG. They had their squad limited to, what is it, 23, 24 players?
I think so.
Yeah, in the Champions League next year, which sounds like, oh man, that's really not that much, but they only used 24, I think, total this entire season in the Champions League. I think the rumor that hasn't been confirmed yet that may be more stiff for them is that I think it was 8 minimum have to be homegrown players for them, or what they define as homegrown. And I don't know that City are going to have that easy of a time populating 8 homegrown players or people that were trained originally in Europe. Now, I know that there are a couple guys like Gael Clichy who you wouldn't think would be, but they are because they trained at Arsenal during their youth. But I still think that's going to be a strain on them. And they're also one of the only teams to appeal their actual punishment from UEFA. A lot of the other teams, PSG in particular, they took it a lot harder. Are only allowed to make one signing. They have to sell before they can buy. They have a salary cap. Their salary can't get any bigger. So they had a much harder punishment, but they took it.
Over the coals.
But City, meanwhile, have managed to say, no, we don't think that's fair, which seems a little absurd to me considering the amount of money that they have spent and some of the sweetheart deals that their ownership has given them. Other people have kind of brought this up, and this isn't something that I'm really well versed in, but City, on top of having purchased a Major League Soccer franchise, also purchased an A-League, an Australian team.
Oh, beautiful.
And they have been writing off sales of intellectual property to their clubs that they've owned in MLS and the A-League as a means of bringing in cash.
So basically their other teams are turning into their offshore accounts?
Yeah, kind of. those other teams will pay them absurd amounts of money for things that could be like a notebook full of like Pellegrini's thoughts on, Nasri's behavior at practice. I mean, who knows what this intellectual property actually is? But it could be for like 20 million pounds. How do we know, and how do you actually value something that could be intellectual property? And it's a really ambiguous thing, and you're already starting to see the way that maybe these purchases of teams in the U.S., in abroad, Australia, things of that nature, could potentially actually just be a means for them to skirt around financial fair play rules, which is something I'd never really considered before.
So, all total, though, do you really think it's going to really dampen things for them?
No, I don't.
All right.
I think they're still going to have their ridiculous wages. They haven't been restricted in that way at all.
Well, let's talk about ridiculous wages. Do you see them doing much addition? I mean, you talk about how Pellegrini kind of went about scaling the team back to something where people could actually have more defined roles in them. Do you add much in the way of big names to this, or?
I don't know the big names.
Because I remember, last, going into the season, they were the ones that were also linked to, Cavani and all these big names.
I don't know. I don't think we're going to see too many big names come in. I think we could if we see one or two leave. There's been a lot of talk of someone like Dzeko leaving for a while now, and I think it could be likely that he does. Maybe he won't.
You think that's because Dzeko knows he can go somewhere and be the number one guy?
Yeah, he could be the number one guy if he went somewhere else. There's also been
he could be the number one guy if he went to Chelsea right now.
Yeah. He could be the number one guy at a lot of places.
I would say 80% of the Premier League.
And I don't know how happy he is being sometimes third or fourth on the pecking order there. So we could see him go. The other name that I think has been oddly linked away a bunch has been Aguero. There's been a lot of talk that he may go back to Spain, potentially to Real Madrid, potentially to Atletico again, where he played before as a part of a swap deal, perhaps seeing Diego Costa go the other way. So, we're getting to the point of the year where it's silly season. We're going to see all these ridiculous links.
Already
and who knows? But I don't think we're going to see a lot of additions with them because they don't really need to. Maybe in the midfield. Maybe reinforcing the center backs. I don't know.
Let's move one down. Liverpool, 2-1 win over Newcastle. 2-1 win. It almost wasn't.
Yeah, they didn't look very good in the earlier portions of the match, and went down to Newcastle thanks to a Martin Skirtle own goal, a guy that just can't stop scoring at either end of the field. I think that's his fourth own goal of the season, which is also a Premier League record. So
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Got to be known for something.
Hey, may as well be own goals.
Obviously, their top scorer is the league's top scorer. Suarez finishes the season with 31.
An impressive tally.
That is actually, we've been not doing it much lately, but the whole Suarez is greater than.
Yeah, this used to be like a regular feature on the pod earlier this year.
Because it was a lengthy list for a while there. It got up as much as half the league.
Mm-hmm.
He only finished above one club, Norwich. Only had 28 goals scored.
That's still an impressive feat that one man outscored
an entire club. The combo, though, the Stephen A. Smith combo, if you add Sturridge's goals, that brings you to 52 goals. Those two guys alone, Villa, Cardiff, Crystal Palace, Fulham, Hull, Newcastle, Norwich, Stoke, West Brom, West Ham. 10 clubs they outscored.
That's incredible. So you just add one more guy into the mix from the same team, mind you, and they've outscored half the teams in the Premier League this year.
Yeah, and we're pretty close to knocking off. If they had a few more, they were right on the heels of Spurs and a few other clubs.
Yeah, and do you think they're going to be able to do that again next year?
Well, let's talk about this because I feel like it's not been talked about too much, but is Suarez, is he going to stay?
He's been refuting rumors lately, saying that he would leave.
I feel like with the amazing season he had, with the massive letdown that the end of the season ended up being,
right?
I mean, last week we were talking about him sobbing uncontrollably on the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
If he goes, man, I don't know if I can do this again.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can roll the dice with these guys.
Yeah,
again.
like I put everything in it.
He
for
put
them
he
this
put
year.
he
Yeah.
put 31 goals in it. He put everything in this thing.
And maybe it won't be worth it again for him. You know, you'd expect that he'd want to stick around and try the Champions League with them. You know,
Sure.
That's what they've been fighting for all these years. What he
But-
supposedly was wanting to leave for.
Clearly, a Spanish side, an Italian side, someone could come by and say, "Well, we're already in Champions League.
Yeah.
We're going there too, so no worries there."
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible he could leave in the summer. His value will never be higher than right now.
Exactly.
Ever.
And I think that's the reason why you got to think he might move, because you're going to have his agent, you're going to have his people saying, "This is the best chance we have.
Mm-hmm.
The most money you can get is right now."
I mean, I think there's only a handful of clubs where he could potentially end up, and I don't know that any of them will be spending that kind of money this summer. You know, look at the slapping of the hands that financial fair play has been. Is someone like a Real Madrid or, you know, a Bayern Munich going to splash out the amount of money that's going to be necessary to pry away a player like Suarez? So, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a pretty rocky scenario, and I would be shocked if he left, but I wouldn't be that shocked if he left as well.
Okay. I guess the other question, well, two other questions. Not so much a question. Steven Gerrard falling short again.
Mm-hmm.
You got to feel bad for this guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the narrative right now, too. I mean, everyone's in this little pity party for Steven Gerrard, and I think he deserves it. You can see how much he wanted to win this title, and it's the one trophy that he really doesn't have sitting in his trophy cabinet. So for a guy like him that's getting on in years and is towards the end of his career, he's probably not going to have any chances like this, especially with everyone looking to retool in the summer and improve. You know, Liverpool are going to have to do a lot more on top of the fact that they're now going to be juggling a lot more balls than they have been in years past.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone, you know, it's great. They finished second. It's a tremendous achievement for them, far higher than anyone was picking them to finish this year.
And you look where they were the last 2 years. I mean, to jump up from that with a new manager,
Mm-hmm.
Who they stood by.
But
I think it was an incredible season for them.
yeah, I mean, and I don't want to take anything away from that, because I think it was amazing that they were in this fight all the way up until the last day, when a lot of us at the beginning of the year were considering them maybe fourth place challengers. You know, that, and I think that's where they would have even seen themselves. So I think where it really comes into play is next year they're going to have to do that same thing on top of also handle the Champions League, which they haven't had European football in, 4 or 5 years now. And we're not just talking Champions League. We're talking Europa League on top of it. So,
yeah. Well, and I guess that's my next question is, we've seen how the heavy schedules can really batter a team. I mean, yeah, I've mentioned several times the past 2 seasons, the amount of games that Chelsea have been forced to play
mm-hmm.
because of European competition and all the other things that come along with that, especially when you succeed. United played a lot of matches this year that they don't have to worry about next year.
Right.
Is that going to be a legit worry for Liverpool that the added weight of Champions League could really derail some of their momentum in the league?
I mean, I think it absolutely will be, and I think where it's going to really challenge them, unless they're very active this summer and spend a good chunk of money, is depth, and particularly in defense, where they were weak already this year. And, you know, they had a championship caliber offense at Liverpool this season, but they had a championship, literally like the next league down defense at times. Yeah. And it's kind of a conundrum that they find themselves in. So unless they really go out and make a couple big purchases, reinforce in the back, strengthen up in their midfield, provide themselves some secondary, you know, options for when some of these players eventually go out injured or find suspensions through these extra matches. You know, it could be a big drag on their season, and it may find them back out of the Champions League places this year.
All right, let's move to Number 3.
Your boys.
Chelsea. They finished the season with a come-from-behind 2-1 win at Cardiff.
Yeah.
Fernando Torres scored a goal today.
How about that?
The winning goal, no less. It's like one that actually mattered in a way.
Not very often he does that.
No. Well, I guess he does it a little bit, but it's always surprising when it happens.
Yeah.
Top goal scorer, Hazard.
Mhm.
14 goals.
Not bad.
Not bad, but for a side that's finishing in the top 4, that's a bit low, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a bit low. You know, I think there's no doubt that Chelsea's offense was the weak point this year for them. In particular, the strikers.
Of all their problems, I mean, everything that went wrong because they just couldn't score to fix the problems. When they would leak a goal to a bad side, you thought, they're not winning this because they don't have some guy that can just go out there and just grab a goal. Drogba's gone.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have been lacking in that department since Drogba's departure.
Yeah. And so there was never that guy that you said, oh, he'll go and he'll get us a goal.
Mm-hmm.
He can, ratchet it up to that next level.
Well, I think at times Hazard was that guy for you guys, and I think
he was. He had a stretch in the middle of the season where he was fantastic, and he was the guy scoring the 1 or 2 goals that we needed to survive for that match and get 3 points.
Yeah.
But we needed much more than that. We needed someone from a striker position that can create an actual legit threat. No, we didn't have it. So one of the other things, and this brings Hazard back into play, we're starting to see if one thing Jose's been known for this year is alienating players.
Right. Mata.
Mata, he ran Mata right out of town. He has replaced him with Oscar, but Oscar has seen the bench a heck of a lot lately.
Mm-hmm.
And then right at the end of the season, this little verbal through the media dust-up that he has with Hazard.
Yep.
You're wondering, I understand that there's a lot of guys on the team that aren't exactly the style of guys that he would have brought on the team.
Right.
But they're still good players. In fact, in Hazard's case, they're great players. You wonder how much he's willing to create problems just so he can get the guys he wants.
Well, I mean, I think it's partially create problems. I also think it's kind of like breaking a wild horse.
Yeah, trying to break them, trying to push them to be better.
Trying to push them to be better, trying to get them to raise their game, to play a more defensively sound, safe game at times and more efficient. And that's kind of what Mourinho does. He always.
So you think Mata couldn't hack it?
Well, I'm not saying that he couldn't hack it, but maybe he was more resistant to the idea. Maybe he was, not someone who wanted to put in that type of effort. So I think this was definitely a year of transition for Chelsea. And I think, that I was naive enough to think that they might win the league at the beginning of the year. In that type of transition might have seemed a bit unwise looking back upon it. But
let's talk though quickly about another transition that might happen with Chelsea.
Okay.
That not a whole lot of people are talking about. Josie is claiming that they are going to offer contracts to the old guard.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley Cole, John Terry, Frank Lampard are out of contract at the end of June.
Okay.
How many of them do you think come back? And you can even add on top of that now with the whole Czech situation and Jose even throwing out to the media that he thinks that he wants Courtois to be part of the team next year.
Right. I mean, I think we had the same we didn't have the same discussion, but we could have had the same discussion had the podcast been around then. At the end of last year, I think we all thought that they were all 3 potentially going to be gone. I think it would be absurd to think that all 3 of them are going to be gone. I think John Terry was probably the first name down on the team sheet for most of the season, which is kind of insane to think because I think as little as at the beginning of the season even, we all kind of thought, well, this is probably his last one.
But he had a great season.
Yeah, he had a really good season overall.
And then Ashley Cole, he didn't come on until way late in the season.
Yeah, he's out injured for a good chunk.
Lampard, his starts were few and far between.
But effective when he was in.
Yeah, and he today has also been named to England's squad.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a few people that don't think that Lampard's played his last games in Chelsea and in England. He has, though, been the guy that has, of all of them, been linked to moves to, especially the MLS, for like almost 3 years now.
Yeah, but where's he even going to go in MLS?
And that's the thing. I just don't know if that scenario exists this offseason.
Yeah.
Next offseason? Absolutely.
New York?
New York?
Sounds like a good place to go. But he also has kind of that Mr. Chelsea feel, the same way that Terry does. That you almost feel like, yeah, if he stopped playing at Chelsea, they're probably going to offer him a job at Chelsea too. So.
Oh yeah, that's waiting for him and probably for Terry. Cole, I'm not sure about.
Yeah, I'd say of the three of them, Cole's probably the most likely to go.
Yeah.
I think they could,
Where do you think he'll just sign with some like a mid-table?
I could see him going somewhere like Monaco. I think that's where he'll probably end up is, a club where he could be of use to them. He'll help to put some butts in seats and sell some jerseys. And one last payday for him in a tax haven. I think that's something that...
Nothing wrong with that.
It seems right up his alley, considering he's pretty much a bastard. So.
Well, yeah. So, I guess then the other thing with Chelsea is who is going to be the striker next year? This is obviously the number one issue that has to be addressed in the offseason. Jose has even said as much that it's going to be the number one thing addressed in the offseason. He has said that next year with a striker that they will be a force to be reckoned with, all this rhetoric. Yet he's also said that Torres will be here next year.
Yeah.
So, I guess he might be talking out of both sides.
Well, I mean, who do you think they're going to go after? I think there's an obvious target.
I mean, everything points to Diego Costa. Mm-hmm. Everything points to that as far as what people are hearing. I don't know. Something tells me, with PSG having to sell, maybe Cavani gets put back in play. That was a guy they were hot after last year. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. At the end of the day, there's also Lukaku.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be Lukaku.
I don't think it is, but just when you think you have Jose Mourinho figured out,
yeah, he
does something that makes you go, wait, no.
I don't know anything about Jose Mourinho. Yeah. I still don't think it's going to be Lukaku. I think Diego Costa makes the most sense. He's a Jose type of player.
Yeah.
He not only brings goals, but he also brings a shitload of grit. I don't know if you've ever paid really close attention to him while he's playing.
He's a beast.
He's a beast and an asshole at that. A total prick that's going to be
He'll fit in with Jose.
Chipping at your heels. Yeah, and Jose loves those provocative type of players. Those are useful tools to him. I still think if he goes, that they'll try to offload Torres as a part of the payment for that.
Yeah.
Now, if that does happen, I think they're still going to end up paying a good sized chunk of Torres' wages. I think that's the way it's probably going to go.
Okay, so you bring in Diego Costa. Who is your other striker? Do you keep one of the two you already have? Do you bring Lukaku back? Lukaku wants to be the starter. He wants to be the number one. So
I don't think he's going to be happy with.
He's going to be begging for another loan if that's going to be the case.
And that's the reason why I don't think they're going to bring him back. I think they're probably going to sell him this summer. Again, I don't know. I mean, that's maybe.
Can Everton afford him? Oh, we'll get to that, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think Spurs. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see that happening.
You're upgrading Abayor?
Yeah, I think that would be an upgrade.
Good for the younger, flashier model?
Yeah, perhaps. One that doesn't seem quite as loose a rocket. So, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a precarious situation for Chelsea, and I'm intrigued to see who they're going to bring in this summer.
Moving on, Arsenal, finishing with the fourth place trophy.
They love it. It's their favorite trophy because they win it. It's the only one they win anyway.
2-0 win over Norwich today. Giroud has 16 goals. He leads the pack.
Did you see the Aaron Ramsey volley?
I did not. I heard it was bonerific.
Yeah, it was a pretty spectacular goal. He's one of those guys, I think if he had been fit for more of the season, they probably could have done more this year.
So that was one of the big points that I had written down here, that Ramsey, Walcott, two of the biggest names on the team, they were without for the majority of the season.
Yeah.
Especially with Ramsey, as hot as he came into the season.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he was in Player of the Year type form at the beginning of the year.
And then he misses basically the winter.
Yeah. So I think, injuries at Arsenal have always kind of been an issue. It's always been something where they've had a linchpin that's gone down and it's caused them issues. It's also an issue that's been ongoing for them is they never seem to play well until the pressure is off. At the beginning of the season, when there's no pressure, they were on fire. At the end of the season, when there's no pressure and they're out of the hunt for anything of importance, they're on fire again. So there are things that need to change at Arsenal. I don't know what they are. But the speculation right now that's the biggest is that Wenger's going to go in the summer.
Yeah, I'm hearing this, but I don't know. I won't believe it till I see it.
I mean, he's been mooted as one of the potential names at Barcelona.
Here's my question. I guess it leads into this. For Arsenal, when will fourth place not be enough? And are we there right now?
I mean, I think
if Arsenal's,
there are fans that feel that way.
If we're pushing Arsenal out the door, then obviously fourth place isn't good enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an issue right now. He needs to sign a contract extension. So, I mean, that's
so maybe he's just
maybe
hemming and hawing and letting people flirt with him.
Perhaps.
Just to...
Maybe he's tired of the, people not being happy enough. Maybe Arsenal always paints a grim picture of what's going on at Arsenal.
He's a grim individual.
He always says, hey, if we could spend like everyone else, we could be great, but that's just not the financial reality at Arsenal.
Like they act like they have no.
And they've been trying to pay off the stadium. And
you may be overpaid there.
Maybe they're trying to be fiscally responsible there, and maybe that he's doing a spectacular job, and we're just not giving him enough credit. But it could be that he's tired of this fight and the issues, and maybe he's not getting as much backing as everyone likes to think that he is. So I just they need to fix a lot still. A lot of the issues that they had last year and years prior were never fixed. And we talked about that all year long, and that's why they're in the position they're in instead of at the top of the table.
Well, and I think expectations this year changed somewhat because I'll give you the lingering stat with Arsenal, 128. That's the number of days they were in first place. 128 days.
And just so you know, that is also the longest anyone's ever been on the top of any European table in the modern era.
By the way,
without winning a title.
City was only in first place for 15 days.
Yeah. Champions, by the way.
Yeah. But today is the only day that matters.
Yeah, it really is. So, you can hang your hat on the old stats there all you want, Arsenal fans, but there's a lot that needs to be fixed. Unless they do that, I think they're going to find themselves in a similar position again next year.
Everton finishing fifth. They had a sniff at top four there. At one point, it was not to be. They could not handle the weight of it. Immediately crumbling, but they didn't crumble today. 2-0 win over Hull. Lukaku, 15 goals, takes the cake for the team. Question mark. Lukaku? Does he stay or does he go? I mean, can they pay for him? They're getting Europa
League money, and
that's a little bit of money.
The package money for the Premier League TV deal goes up this year for everyone as well. So I don't think they have the money, or that their ownership will be willing to dole out to bring in Lukaku. I think he's.
What about Jerry D?
Jerry D is already guaranteed to be back. So Barcelona have renewed his loan again.
So they got one guy back.
So Deulofeu will be back, and that's good for them. But I think the other person, Lukaku is someone that we're concerned about his potential future. Jerry D will be back. But the other person they need to be worried about is Ross Barkley. Will he still be around for them next year?
Will the big boys come sniffing around?
I think there could be some teams that are in the hunt for him. But I could also see Everton sticking to their guns.
I know Chelsea needs more midfielders because they just can't sign enough.
You guys just don't have enough.
You don't have enough guys.
You got to collect them all. They're like Pokemon for you guys.
That's right. Similar question to the one I gave you with Liverpool. They are going to have a European schedule, something that they're not too used to. Mm-hmm. How is that going to play out for them?
So I think that's going to be a struggle for them, especially for a team that was thin and not very deep as they already were. And the note that I had written down here for me was they need to reinforce. And that's something that is clear as day. They need depth. It's the issues that they were experiencing throughout the course of the season was when someone went down hurt, they really didn't have a fabulous option to replace them. So while Martinez has done some excellent things, they're playing much more liberated, I think is the word, than they had looked under Moyes. And it's not a side that's completely different. I mean, there are a lot of the same players that had come up through Everton are still there. So
maybe the Europa money gets spent on depth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we'll see. We'll see maybe a player or two that might come into the starting 11, but after that, I think we'll end up seeing kind of guys who will help them, but maybe not be starters.
The last European spot, courtesy of your friends at Manchester City.
Thanks, guys.
Go to your Spurs. They get a nice 3-0 win over Villa today.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you take the reins for most of this. Adebayor, I'll point out, having only really been a part of the team, the first team for basically half the season.
Yep.
Still led the whole squad with 11 goals.
Yeah, which is a pretty nice tally. I mean, I don't want to make too big of a deal about that. I think if he had played the whole season, we probably would have only seen him tally like 13. I mean, he's that type of player. Where,
sure.
He took his chances, but he would have only taken a few of those chances had he been in every match. So, Spurs are a team that it's so confusing to me as a fan. We had everything on a platter for us to maintain this kind of top four push and maybe even really crack it this year. And I hate to be crying over spilt milk, but I think if we had held on to Bale, we would have had a good chance this year. I mean, and the type of Premier League season that it was, I think we could have held on to him, spent a little bit of money on our own, and we could have been a much better side, but that's not the way everything kind of worked out. So I think we're a team that our ambition is large, but our impatience with progress for that ambition has cost us a lot. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know that we ever should have really fired AVB, and I don't think we're any better off than we would have been if he had stayed the entire season.
Well, I guess that is the biggest question going into the offseason for you guys is who's managing this club next year?
Yeah, so I just wrote a whole piece on this on the blog, so I'm not going to rehash too much of it. If you want to know my full thoughts on it, you can go there. But there are a few names that are in the running. Obviously, Van Gaal is out because he's clearly going to be in at Manchester United. At least that's if the rumors are to be believed.
They say possibly by the next weekend.
Yeah. But I think the leading candidate right now is Ajax manager Frank de Boer. I think he could be an excellent pick. But he's also a really risky pick. No Premier League experience. He's only been managing 4 years now. He's got a great record at Ajax, but great records in Holland don't always mean great records in England. You can ask Josie Altidore all about that. So, I don't know. I hope it's not Tim Sherwood. I'll just say that much.
I don't know. I mean, they couldn't possibly do that, could they?
I mean, even old Tim has been hinting that he doesn't think he's going to be around next season.
Well, he's a bit of a sourpuss, so he's always going to have a glass half empty kind of way about it.
He is a sourpuss. That's an easy way of putting it. So, I don't know. I'm glad the season is over as a Spurs fan.
Was it a bit arduous there at the end?
It was a bit arduous. And it's crazy to think that we just missed our points record tally again as well. So, as terrible as everything seems, it wasn't quite so terrible.
Speaking of quite so terrible, it was quite terrible.
Yeah.
For Manchester United, finishing out of Europa, out of Champions League, no European nights for Old Trafford.
It's the first time in a quarter century.
Yeah, I was about ready to say that. First, this is their worst finish in a quarter century. believe 89, they finished 13th. They haven't sucked that bad since.
Wasn't that Sir Alex's first year in charge, too? Maybe not his first year in charge, but close to it. Either way, it was early on.
It was early in the Ferguson tenure. But, I mean, it was great for us. I mean, talk about where the narrative was just overflowing at United.
It's a good thing that we don't have any like close friends or people on the podcast who really care to get angry with us. Because we've had some fans that have been up in arms when we don't mention their squads enough. But United fans, they seem to just kind of take it on the chin this year fairly well.
They handled it all right. I think because they know at the end of the day they're still United. They can still spend their way / where United come play for us their way out of problems, at least in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Rooney, 17 goals.
Yeah.
He was your leader, a man who was hemming and hawing about even staying with the club that season and possibly trying to force his way out / get a better contract.
Well, and so that's a question, or brings up a question that I think is pretty important this year, because everyone's kind of said, like, oh, David Moyes, he was the wrong pick. Clearly didn't work underneath him. But I do wonder, is it really him that was the reason things went wrong in United? So could it possibly be that we could blame an aging defense? You know, Rio Ferdinand is like 100 years old now. Like,
oh yeah,
when he's on the pitch, he needs a walker. And Vidic, you know, was at odds with the club. You know, you could tell that as clear as day, and the fact that he didn't renew with them and sign a new contract is evidence of that enough. And so those things are kind of on track. The defense was also fragile in the respect that the guys that have been brought in, the younger ones, seem to get hurt. Or they're just not that good, like Chris Smalling.
Yeah, there's that.
And then you also have injuries. So, you know, Van Persie was hurt for a really large chunk of the season, and he wasn't at all last year.
How much do you think he could have changed things?
I mean, I think he probably could have.
Like, you think they're finishing 5th, maybe?
Maybe. You know, maybe even pushing top 4. You know,
okay.
He's a guy that, when he's fit, can score goals in bunches, and he wasn't doing that for them this year. So there were a lot of things that weren't right at United this year, and I'm not saying that, you know, Van Persie being fit or a Wayne Rooney that was 100% invested in the club, you know, wouldn't have helped things.
But you know, you kind of hinted at it with the older players, with guys like Rooney having his issues that dated him all the way back to the end of, you know, this time last year when he wasn't even present for their final match.
Right.
Did Sir Alex see this and go, this is probably a good time to get out?
I mean, maybe.
This is a good time as any to get out because this team is going to need to flip over a little bit, and I'm too old to sit here and try to sit through this transition.
Yeah, I mean,
this is a good time to go.
That could be it. You don't see many people blaming him for all of this right now.
Yeah. He was the one that picked Moyes.
Yeah, I mean,
he was the one that decided, hey, I'm out of here.
Yeah. When
he did. Leaving the cupboard not bare, but the cupboard old and indifferent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the finger is not pointed at Sir Alex enough in this case.
Yeah, I can see that.
So obviously the question that we pretty much think we have answered. By the way, they 1-1 draw with Southampton today.
Yeah.
We think it's going to be Van Gaal.
Yeah, I think so.
Signing within the next week or so, possibly.
Potentially.
Or an agreement in place. Who are they bringing in? I mean, are they going to have to be the guys that are going to make big splashes this summer?
I 100% expect to see United splashing very big this summer.
Okay.
And some of the names that they're being linked with are some of the bigger names that could be on the moves throughout the course of this offseason. So, you know, the links are almost innumerous at this point. You know, everyone knows that United are going to be on the hunt this summer, so everyone.
The Luke Shaw one was out within about 2 seconds of the matches being over today.
And I think that'll happen. and I think it'll happen pretty quickly. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen before the World Cup, in particular, if Shaw doesn't end up making the final squad.
Lallana, another one.
Lallana, maybe.
That one also was out within the hour.
Yeah. But we're also looking at bigger names than that, and there have been, talk about potentially bringing in, a Cesc Fabregas from Barcelona to play in the midfield to kind of slow the tempo down and control things a little bit more. And, some of these other really big names that they've kind of been in the hunt for could potentially be back on the table again as well. So I fully expect to see them spend potentially like Spurs type money this summer, £100 million spent in one summer on players.
Well, hopefully it gets them better than sixth place.
Yeah. Hopefully.
One last question with United. You talk about how they're probably going to bring a lot of people in. You got to figure there's going to be a good amount of people going out.
Yeah.
A lot of the older guard we already know, guys like Vidic who are already basically signed deals elsewhere. Is Marouane Fellaini going to be a United player next year?
I could see them loaning him. I think I would imagine his wages will probably be high enough to make him hard to move.
Loan him back to Everton?
Maybe. That might not be a bad way of them handling that, although Gareth Barry...
that's going to be one club that will probably be inclined to that idea.
Yeah. I could also see him going back to the continent, too, and actually, finding his way either to a German side or maybe even a French league side. I think he'd probably fit in fairly well in either of those leagues.
He looks good in a good Werder Bremen green.
Exactly. I think the people that are most likely to leave are going to be people like...
Nanny?
Yeah, well, he just signed a 5-year deal with the
that's
club.
right.
Yeah,
He signed this
can't imagine that he's going to be going anywhere, except for to his bank. I could see someone like Danny Welbeck leaving the club since he wasn't really finding any time with the team.
He's almost like a Dzeko kind of guy where he could go to half the places in the EPL and be the number one.
Yeah. The other person that I think is for sure going to leave is Chicharito.
What did I just say about Welbeck? Same thing for Chicharito.
Yeah,
he could go to most of the places in the league and be the guy.
Yeah. So,
I would possibly even put Chelsea on that list.
There are big changes afoot at Old Trafford this summer, and it's going to be interesting to see how they try to respond because they
you have to, right? You have to respond to a year that's been quarter of a century bad.
I think anything outside of the Champions League places is unacceptable for them. So that's what they're going to be aiming for, but whether or not they can do that and make wholesale changes, and Spurs have shown just how hard that is to do. They've got a lot on their plate.
It'll be they will be the story of the offseason much as they were the story of the Premier League season.
Yeah.
In 8th place, Southampton, a commendable season for them.
Mm-hmm. They're a fun team to watch this year.
They are. A very fun guy to watch. Jay Rodriguez, 15 goals, led the way for the Saints.
Unfortunately, we'll be missing the World Cup thanks to an ACL tear at the end of the year. But he was a part of this attacking trio that they had of him and Ricky Lambert and Adam Lallana, all of whom, had all of them been fit, would also probably make a good sizable chunk of the attacking trio for England this summer as well. I would be shocked if all three of those guys, Rodriguez ruled out, of course, because of injury. But I'd be shocked if either of them weren't in the team, given the kind of campaigns that they've had. So, and let's not also forget Luke Shaw, who's just been spectacular this season, especially for a kid as young as he is. So, the big question for them is, can they keep it all together?
My question right here is, how do they maintain?
Yeah.
How do they keep some of these these guys that are really growing as far as their brand as a player? And how do they keep, if they have to fill those voids, how do they fill those voids the right way to where they can maintain a good showing again, a mid-table, top 10 finish?
Well, I mean, and it's not just players that they need to be concerned about, too. Mauricio Pochettino, their manager, has been heavily linked with Tottenham. And he's, outside of Frank de Boer, probably the second favorite candidate at the moment. So they're going to have a fight on their hands to hold on to some of these key pieces. And I think that's going to be the big question of the offseason for them.
Let's move to Stoke. Stoke win 2-1 against West Brom.
They're ninth.
Stoke went after the let's try to actually score some goals this year mindset. It sort of worked. I mentioned it last week that they scored a little over 10 goals more than last season. Crouch is their leader, though.
How many goals?
8 goals.
Yeah.
Not impressive.
No, not impressive, but it's about what you would expect from Stoke. So I'm not
overly
surprised.
This year. So.
Yeah.
Is this a successful endeavor? Let's be an attacking, a more aggressive side when it comes to attacking.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been better for them that this is a club that was just outside the relegation zone last year.
Sure.
And they fired Tony Pulis and brought in Mark Hughes for this reason specifically. They wanted to play a bit more attractively and not so negatively, and they're doing that. They've achieved that goal. I think not. They're not Barcelona by any stretch of the imagination, but they're also not too terrible going forward either. So I think it's worked.
Do you think it's something that is going to be their focus in the off season, is bringing in a few more guys that could possibly help out with that endeavor?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. Maybe make them a little bit more free-flowing. Who knows? Mark Hughes' buying record has not been sterling.
No.
So we'll see if he's able to find any magic once again. But it's going to be an intriguing summer to see how they handle all these expectations.
10th place Newcastle. They lose 2-1 to Liverpool today. Remy, 14 goals.
Okay. Well, he's gone.
He's gone.
100% no chance that he's going to be back. He was at Arsenal last weekend watching the match in person, so I think there's a really good chance he might end up there.
This is a surprising team that they're finishing top 10. They have been at stretches of this season. They've played some of the worst football out of anybody in the Premier League at certain stretches.
I mean,
they are one of the most heavily penalized teams. They've been in basically the most on-field scuffles. This team is a bit of a house fire, but it's certainly they're certainly Newcastle.
Yeah, I mean, they're still a big club, and they still have a lot of resources at their disposal, and they could still turn things around next year. But I think no one's expecting them to. And after the Kabay sale this year, this is a club that kind of just said, well, we had aspirations of getting places, and now it's clear that we don't. You feel bad for the players in that respect, at least a little bit. But for the most part, I think they're a side that have quit on their manager. And Alan Pardew and his gigantic contract are a little scary for anyone to try to get rid of at Newcastle. And they don't want to have to go through all the issues and have a new manager and deal with all this. So
that was my next question. Yeah. So you think, based on the fact of just the hulking contract that he has, that they're going to be stuck with Pardew for another, probably more than another year?
Yeah, I mean, but they're not going down, and I think that's all that their ownership really is looking for. So I think the fans want Pardew out. I don't think there's any question about that. But I think whether or not management does, that's another issue altogether.
Crystal Palace, 11th place. They drew with Fulham today, 2-2, with awful Fulham.
Weren't they in the relegation battle just 2 weeks ago? I feel like
they spent a decent part of the season in 19th.
Well, and I think that can just go to show you how packed the middle of the table towards the bottom end of the table really is. The fact that we were talking about them potentially being relegated just a couple weeks ago, and now here they are at 11th.
Punchin and Gale, 7 goals apiece.
Yeah. Dwight Gale has been a favorite of mine this year. ever since the first weekend. I think he's been a pretty impressive young player and someone to keep an eye on next year since they're going to be sticking around.
Just an altogether good season, and one that we just talked about was horrible.
Yeah.
A horrible situation at certain points of the season. They obviously had to fire Ian Holloway, bring in Tony Pulis, and Crystal Pulis gets it done.
Yeah, and Pulis, I think, was the turning point for them. And normally, firing a manager mid-season and bringing in a new one is not a very smart strategy.
No, it's if you survive, it's considered a victory.
Yeah, but I think they did much more than survive. And in fact, after he was brought on, they had almost Champions League caliber form in the league after that point. So
yeah,
great job for them. Also worth mentioning, they have the best support in the league at Selhurst Park. And they have crazy tifos that they throw up all the time. So it's a delight that we're going to get to have them in the Premier League again, because there's not, most of the grounds have these kind of corporate atmospheres any longer. And it's a breath of fresh air to see Palace fans acting like true fans.
Swansea get a 3-1 win over Sunderland. Boney with 16 goals this year.
Not too bad.
A fair bit of goals for a guy playing on a 12th place team.
Mm-hmm.
Decent season for Swansea. They were another side that had a managerial change, and they liked their managerial change. Monk got a new deal.
Yeah, so he was brought in as a temporary player manager. Never picked himself.
No.
Angry.
Yeah.
But did well enough that the club did extend him and give him a full-time deal. Also, no mention of whether or not he's still maintaining that player-manager role. So
yeah, we don't know what he's going to be next year.
There's always next year, hopefully.
But altogether, a solid season for Swansea. They are also an enjoyable team to watch. Not maybe as fun to watch as they were last year when you had Michu just lighting the place on fire.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see what they look like next year.
Mm-hmm.
West Ham 13th. They lost, of course, to the champions today, 2-0.
Yeah, they didn't really touch the ball at all today.
No, they were not allowed.
Kind of a perfect summary for what their season looked like on the whole, I would say. A side whose fans are so irate with their style of play and their negativity that they booed them during wins this year.
Well, and outside of the fact that Nolan had 7 goals to lead the way, the only 2 points I have written down here, not particularly positive. Big Sam?
Yeah.
I feel like people are trying to push him out the door.
I think Big Sam will not be pleased with everyone trying to push him out the door, and he may very well walk himself this summer.
Yeah, he will see himself out.
Mm-hmm.
And going forward, is Andy Carroll still the answer up top?
I think he is probably not going to be going anywhere else anytime soon.
Okay.
And he seems so English that they can't get rid of him. That's a club that love their Englishness.
That sounds fair.
I'd be shocked if he went elsewhere.
Possibly the biggest shock of the table here at the end of it after 38 weeks. 14th place, safe mid-table side, Sunderland.
Wait a minute, Sunderland.
Sunderland, who, as I just mentioned, lost today 3-1 to Swansea, finished 14th. Adam Johnson led the way with 8 goals. I believe he had pretty much all of those in the span of 4 weeks.
Yeah. And I don't think Barini was too far behind him either. He kind of came on super hot at the end of the year. Sunderland were a team that finally found their form, and it's kind of crazy to think. I mean, we had resigned them to relegation midway through the campaign.
We buried them back in December, I think.
Yeah. And, Gus Poyet deserves loads of credit for that. It's kind of, we forget very quickly that crazy-ass Paulo Di Canio was their manager at the beginning of the season. And
all right. Chin up.
Yeah.
Chin up.
Yeah, and I think they've come so far since then. So it's a neat experience to see what they've gone through. It's good that they're going to be around in the Premier League. maybe bad for Josie Altidore, which means...
So that was my next question,
Yeah.
Jose Altidore. We kind of threw around the idea that maybe he almost would have been helped by the fact of them getting relegated as far as his career getting forced to go one way or another.
Right.
With them staying around for another year, what happens?
I don't know. Josie's going to make the World Cup team this summer. There's no question about that. His place isn't on the line in that regard.
No, not at all.
I think it comes down to whether or not Josie feels that he needs to prove himself or not, and if he needs to meet this challenge, and if he doesn't, then I don't think we're going to see much more of him over there at all. But
do you think they look to maybe ship him out, loan him out?
I could see one or two of those, one or both of those situations happening. Maybe having him loan. I could see him going back to Holland for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's a tough spot that Josie's finding himself in right now, and whether or not he has the fortitude to be able to pull himself through it, I think is a question that needs to be answered.
15th place, Aston Villa. 3-0 loss to Spurs today. Benteke, 10 goals, led the way this season. He has, of course, been out for an extended period of time.
Yep.
Pretty much one of the worst back lines in the Premier League this year.
Yeah.
Just the way they've hung poor Brad Guzan out to dry.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are starting to question whether or not this is Paul Lambert's fault.
He was a guy that appeared to be on the hot seat last year where they had their little great escape and made it through and stayed up.
Right.
Is he a guy that maybe in the off season he is shown the door?
Potentially. Yeah, I think that could be a guy that we would see going out this summer, and I think their fans certainly want to see more of that. Did someone just try to punch that ball?
I think so. I don't believe they'll let you do that, but yeah.
No.
Mentioned of Benteke, their only bright spot offensively. He's kind of a guy that could he potentially go somewhere, or will almost the fact that he's been injured and will probably be injured for most of the summer keep him at Villa?
I think the injury concern is definitely something that will scare off potential suitors. I think Villa missed the boat on maximizing their potential unless he has a blowout World Cup. Is he even going to get to play in the World Cup?
I think he probably is going to be out for most of the World Cup. I don't think he's going to be healthy for it.
So, I don't know. Someone might try to take a stab at him, but Villa need him. And I don't know that they can afford to get rid of him. And that might be the actual deciding factor for that.
Hull Tigers, a 2-0 defeat to Everton today. They finished 16th. Shane Long, Yelovich, 4 goals apiece. That's leading the way at Hull.
Leading scorers. 4 goals.
4 goals.
4 goals. Hull were a team that we almost fancied for a little bit, like mid-season. They seem to be in good form or grinding out some results.
Yeah.
But at the same time, never were that convincing either.
Well, they got important results. Remember, they beat Liverpool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't even know what really else to say about them.
No.
I feel like they're one of those sides that you look at next year and say, they're probably on most people's list to go down.
Yeah, they probably could.
I don't know if they can, have it go snake eyes again for them.
Yeah, and ownership issues remain a concern there, and what they're going to change their name to, and will decisions like that destabilize the club? These are all things that we have to be concerned about for next year.
West Brom, 17th place. They, of course, lose 2-1 to Stoke.
Mm-hmm.
Sessegnon and Berahino, 5 goals apiece. So not much better than Hull.
No, not much at all.
They, of course, had to deal with the troubling disaster that was Anelka, his Quinnell Jester, and their inability to handle that situation properly.
Yeah, the whole club seemed to suffer pretty badly from that and never really recovered their mojo after that point. So I think they'll be looking, having just escaped relegation, they'll be looking for a reset this summer.
Well, and part of that reset, they're probably, I'm assuming, looking for a new manager.
Yeah, Pepe Mel, not exactly impressive.
No, 17th place is not impressive.
Yeah, so I think there's changes to be rung at West Brom this summer.
And now, the relegation zone.
Mm-hmm.
Norwich, 18th place. They lose 2-0 to Arsenal today. Hooper and Snodgrass, 6 goals apiece, but right off the bat, we have to say Hooper and Snodgrass going to be on the club next year?
No, probably not.
No, I didn't think so.
Also, one of their bigger signings, Ricky Van Wolfswinkel, was pretty much anonymous this year.
He was pretty much nowhere to be seen except for preview magazines.
Yeah.
Who's managing this club next year? Who wants to manage this club next year?
I don't want to do it. Do you?
Sherwood?
Yeah. This would be a great job for Sherwood. One that he could get fired in pretty quickly.
There you go.
It just seems right up his alley.
Will we see them fall 2015?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Norwich are a decent-sized club. They have a decent-sized stadium. Have some good history behind them, but never can seem to get themselves up over the hump. So they could be a side to rebound, but if they are moving a bunch of these players, much as we would expect for them to do in this offseason, I think it's pretty unlikely that we'll see them rebound right away.
19th place, Fulham. 2-2 draw with Crystal Palace.
Mm-hmm.
So, not bad there.
Yeah.
Sidwell leads the way for them with 7 goals. Sidwell, Fulham next year?
Yeah, probably not. I think he's a good guy that one of the new teams coming up will probably try to look to pick up.
Any other players you think are probably going to head for the hills?
I think a lot of players for Fulham will head for the hills. They have a lot of luxury players there, and I think that's part of the reason why they find themselves in the position that they're in. They didn't necessarily buy the right type of players. People who were hungry, people who wanted to fight. Guys like Berbatov aren't going to keep you from getting relegated. They're going to, ask for a plane ride to Monaco and then never return home from it. So I'm not surprised to see them go down. It is a little sad to see them end their 13-year run in the Premier League.
Well, and we talked about it, from the American standpoint, that this has been an important club for American players.
Mm-hmm.
Clint Dempsey has, I guess, is he going to go to Spurs next time he wants a loan?
Maybe. I
don't know what there's no point in playing for Fulham on a loan move.
No.
At this point. Will we see them in fall 2015?
I think there's a 0% chance we'll see Fulham.
So you think Fulham's going to be toiling for a while?
Yeah, and I could even see them potentially finding themselves in trouble in the championship next year. And the reason being that they don't necessarily have like a system or any sort of overarching way that the club is being run or worked towards.
They do. 3 managers a season. That's their strategy right now.
Turnover seems to be about their only strategy. So, I don't know. I mean, I think it'll be a tough year for them. They're going to have to shed some salary in the championship, and I think that's going to make it a lot harder for them to rebound back up.
And last but not least, least. Cardiff.
Yeah.
Very much least.
Yeah, so
They lose to Chelsea today, 2-1. Much had 7 goals. That's your guy.
Yeah.
The manager is staying.
Okay.
We've pretty much been told that.
Okay.
Players, though, I was looking at, I don't know how many Cardiff players are worth anything to anybody.
Yeah, and I think there are a set of players that would probably do well in the championship. They've all kind of gelled together with one another, know each other. I think the hardest thing for them to overcome is going to be that crazy owner of theirs.
Yeah, that's always going to be fun.
And he always seems like a loose cannon that's a second away from making a change that could be potentially devastating for the club.
So I got to ask it. Well, first I have to ask, will the fans revolt?
Maybe.
Okay. Will we see them in fall 2015?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think we'll see them either. So
that's the Premier League, the 2013-2014 season.
Yeah.
In the books. We have to talk about as we're watching Match of the Day right now.
Yeah.
We have to give it up once again to NBC.
Yeah, I mean, they knocked it out of the park, and we had high hopes for them, given the programming that we knew. Is if you go back and listen to the first podcast, which we both tried to do, we'd shown some speculation and some concerns about some of the things that NBC might be doing.
We didn't want Bob Costas showing up, trying to talk down to everybody with a pink eye.
Yeah, we don't need that.
We don't need your pink eye.
But NBC not only allayed those fears, but went a step further and made this a tremendous viewing experience. As far as watching the Premier League goes, I would argue that there's no better way to watch the Premier League in the world.
I think you're right there. I think we have it.
Yeah. I mean, in England, you can't watch the Premier League every match of every weekend the way that you can through NBC's package.
I don't think they had all 10 matches on today.
Yeah, they did.
Across somebody's platform.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone owns 10 channels over there.
So, I mean, it's just incredible what they've done and the bar that they've raised. And Fox Soccer never raised it high enough to begin with.
No. I mean, Fox Soccer never used their own commentary team.
Mm-hmm.
They had a studio team where, outside of Rob Stone, it was always just a revolving door of guys. Like, I mean, there was stretches where they would push Vinnie Jones on you.
Yeah.
As a legitimate commentator.
Yeah. I don't need
They're still pushing Piers Morgan on us.
Yeah.
For the FA Cup.
I mean, Fox were doing the things that they do, and it still makes you really scared for the future in the Champions League and the World Cups.
The World Cup. I mean, the Champions League, I think they've figured out how to do that in a way that's somewhat bearable, minus the Gus Johnson games.
Yeah, the Gus Johnson, Eric combo. Yeah, but I mean...
But it's better Eric Winalda than Ian Wright.
Well, I don't know.
Ian Wright said leggy, dead leggy.
Well,
was his analysis of something once.
Well, regardless, I still think the Premier League on NBC was a resounding success. It makes me excited for the Premier League going into next season again, and seeing how they could potentially raise the bar even more.
Matches on your phone, matches on your laptop, matches on whatever you wanted, extra channels, and it didn't really cost you anything extra than you were already paying if you already had NBC Sports Network. The people they brought in were top-notch. Everybody from Rebecca Lowe to the two Robbies. Even they found like the one American commentator that everyone has unanimously said, "Oh, I actually like to hear this guy talk about football," and Kyle Martino.
Yeah, I mean, Martino has been, a former Crew player, someone that I grew up watching play, has really developed into a top-class pundit that is able to see the game and break it down really well. I
mean, you mentioned Winalda a minute ago. Like, every other American pundit has its heavy detractors. Mm-hmm. Twillman, Lawless, Winalda, all those guys have a lot of enemies, a lot of people that don't want to hear them on TV. I've really heard nobody say, "I can't stand Kyle Martino."
No. And he's a likable guy.
Very likable. Yeah. He's savvy. He's quick. He doesn't slow down the conversation. He doesn't try to bring everything down to he doesn't try to relate everything to the MLS.
Mm-hmm. Or his own playing career.
Yeah, he just says, he just talks about it as what it is.
Yeah.
You really can't say enough for what they did. And I'm excited to see what they do going forward. Speaking of going forward, we have to first go backwards.
Okay.
We did predictions at the beginning of the year.
Okay. We should probably circle around and see how we did.
So, where do you want to start?
Let's start with the top of the table.
Top of the table. Neither of us got it right.
Okay.
You had Chelsea winning the league.
Yeah.
I had Manchester United.
Ooh.
Those guys. So I would say a point goes to you on that one, because at least Chelsea finished near first place.
Yeah, they nearer to it than.
And we're actually at one point this season in first place.
That's true. That's very true.
I had Chelsea finishing second. That's not too far off.
Okay.
City finishing third. You had City finishing second,
Okay.
and United finishing third.
Okay, so I was off the mark there a bit.
Yeah, we both had United as a top. We thought the top three would essentially remain the same as far as who the clubs were.
Mm-hmm.
We just thought the orders would be different.
Okay.
Bottom of the table,
Yeah.
I wasn't way off, but I was incorrect on all three of them.
Okay. Who'd you have?
I had Aston Villa.
Okay, they didn't make it.
They survived.
Yeah, they did.
Hull just barely survived.
Yeah, just barely.
Crystal Palace, actually a very solid season.
Okay,
All
so
told.
didn't get any of those.
No. You had Hull.
Okay,
Again, close, but
not
no
quite.
cigar. You had Fulham
There we go.
and Cardiff.
How
You
about
had
that?
2 of the 3.
So I didn't do too bad.
You did pretty well, I would say.
Yeah, and just
I
barely.
would say the
missed on one of
relegation's a
those.
little bit harder to figure out than the top of the table. I mean, you know the top of the table is going to be you're really only picking from a handful of teams.
Yeah, but I think the factors that I looked at for those at the time were the same reasons why they ended up being there. I mean, Fulham were looking stale, full of luxury players,
Yeah.
a management team that didn't look that strong, and Cardiff, they have a completely farcical ownership situation, and a lot of contention going on there, plus not a whole lot of spending. And those are reasons why we saw them go down, and Hall's struggles were well known as well. So I'm not that shocked that I got that right, but at the same time, I'm feeling a little proud that I was able to do fairly well there.
We both had bubble teams. I did have Fulham as my bubble team to
Okay.
drop. You had Newcastle, actually, as a team that you thought possibly could fall apart, and I think we both were in agreement that Pardew was not going to survive the season.
And yet he's still here somehow.
Somehow. Even though he headbutted a guy.
Yeah,
He did everything he could.
to try to get fired, and
And
yet
yet,
he's
here he
still
is.
employed
He is the George Costanza
of the Premier League.
of Premier League managers.
So before we move on and ditch the Premier League for a summer, we've made a request of our listeners, and only one came good on it. Bastards, all of you who are listening and didn't participate, screw you. But for those of you who did participate, that one person, one of our regular listeners, Mel B, sent in a eulogy for Liverpool FC's season. And this is what we asked for a couple of fans. Obviously Jeremy and I have been eulogizing our team's seasons throughout the course of the season. So you don't need to hear our thoughts on it more. But Mel B wrote, I thought, a poignant and well-written eulogy on Liverpool's season. So without further ado, the only eulogy we received, and probably the only comical one we could have received as well. Since Liverpool was like a constant joke for us to
Is it
kick
purposely
around.
comical?
Yeah, I think it was an attempt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So these are Mel B's words, not my own, or Jeremy's for that matter. Dear Liverpool FC, your season was a little bipolar. You know that, right? Oft are we reminded by analysts how young and new this team was, and they're not wrong. You started with an infant's shrill sob of anger at the extended match ban Luis Suarez served. You then dipped into uncertain form over much of the fall, dropping points to teams you should not. Then, with a terrific run going into Christmas, going top of the table, only to tumble several places by the following week. And already the specter that was so much later to return and haunt us was rising, goal differential. The January transfer window was a disappointment, I don't mind saying. Vainly I wailed, Cassandra-like, about your woeful back line, who, though happy to score goals, both for our side and the opposition's, repeatedly proved entirely wanting in their stated purpose of preventing them. But no new talent was in the offing to my oft-mocked chagrin. Despite the lack of January signings in the new year, you turned over a new leaf, with Gerrard and Coutinho healthy, Suarez and Sturridge lighting up the scoreboard, and Henderson and Sterling surprising us all. Like a surly teenager, you decided to win only when you were ready to, and on your own terms. We had a great run. Your backline may have leaked like a sieve, but your attackers kept our balance sheet in the black. Your football was the stuff of dreams, possession-based but attacking, fluid and brilliant, and all without the deep oil-lined pockets we had come to expect to break Premier League records. Just hard work, heart, and joy in playing the game together that we haven't seen at Anfield in years. And your joy in playing translated to our joy in watching. Poetry in motion was no exaggeration. And on the 25th anniversary of Hillsborough disaster, you reminded the world of our shared humanity and how football, the beautiful game, can bring us together when ugliness, meaningless of death, threatens to divide us. You made us sing, you made us dream, you were spectacular until you weren't. A slip, a sob, and finally a second. The revenant of this season will haunt us until such a time as Liverpool FC finally wins the league. But it will haunt us with beauty and grace, and that is not nothing. Thanks for the roller coaster ride, and thanks for the dreams. In 98 days we go again, but next season we may have a little less narrative and a few more solid points. Next season, grow up and win the motherfucking title.
Wow. I got aggressive there at the end.
It did get a little aggressive at the end, but I thought it was really well written. But a total caricature of what a Liverpool fan is. You know, thinking that they bring a lot to the game, that they're special. Yeah, you know, I'm not trying to belittle this at all.
Second place in motion.
Yeah, second place in motion, I think is a good way of putting it as well. Sometimes substance, as wonderful as it is, doesn't really give us what we're really looking for, and the results that come outside of that substance can sometimes be what really matters. And I think Manchester City probably showed us that a little bit this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think about Chelsea, and you know, some of the games where they had the most possession were beautifully moving the ball around.
Mm-hmm.
Were also the games they ended up losing because they just never scored.
Yeah. So, well, thank you very much, Mel B. Thanks, as always, for submitting your questions. We're going to hopefully try to get some more interaction in next year's podcasts. Hopefully get some more, listeners in and involved with the party. We'd love to get your questions, as always.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely look forward to that more next year. Not that we're not happy with the few participants that we've had so far.
I don't have to share my beer.
No, you don't.
Oh, okay.
No, just me.
Well, you bought them. So.
Okay, well, fine. Then I guess I'm the one sharing.
Let's move stateside. MLS action. Can we start with the Red Bulls match?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. Do keep in mind that we were dealing with like a week and a half's worth of matches. We had midweek matches this week in MLS. Lots of good games went down over the last 7 days or so.
We'll hit
a few of them. We're not going to hit all of them. And we feel a little bad because this being our last episode of the season, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about MLS over the summer, even though a good chunk of MLS is pointless over the summer. Kind of just settles the table out, a lot of back and forth. Things don't really heat up until the end of the year.
I mean, outside of the World Cup episodes that we have planned, we're not going to be talking about anything during the summer.
Yeah.
We're just not going to be doing podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll talk about MLS again when we resume back in the fall with our regularly scheduled podcasts, and that's great. So don't feel like we're trying to do MLS a disservice. We need some break. Like, we have families that are angry that we do this every night. So, but we'll be back in the fall, but we don't want to make it seem like we're doing this just to punish MLS because we don't like it. We do like MLS.
Love MLS.
We just need to vacation.
We have a job.
Yeah. But let's talk about that first game, the one that needs highlighting, and it's the 9-goal thriller that went down Saturday night in New York. Well, New Jersey, depending on where you really want to go. You all right there?
No.
Just excited for this Red Bull New York and Chicago Fire game. But to pardon the pun, Chicago survived a firestorm there.
Yeah, a firestorm in the embodiment of a short gentleman named Bradley Wright Phillips, who said, I'm going to go with a hat trick.
And this is his second hat trick of the season, by the way.
Yeah, he's playing incredibly of late.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's right now probably the guy in the best form in MLS at the moment. Mm-hmm. He had a hat trick today. He had at least one goal in the midweek match that they were involved in as well. And has been in the goals regularly for the last few matches out while Jeremy dies over here. So
that water kills you, man.
Yeah, it really does. Watch out for it. But the other thing to keep in mind about this is that wasn't the only hat trick in the game either.
No, there was one on the other side.
Yeah, so Chicago's Harrison Shipp also notched a hat trick, which his hat trick ended up tilting the favor a little bit more in the way of Chicago. So a great match overall. Definitely one to go back and at least watch the highlights for if you can get your hands on the full match. It was one worth watching. But that's actually Chicago's first win of the season, too, which they've been searching for quite some time. And I would imagine shipping 4 goals in the process is probably not the way they envision that going.
Nope.
So, couple other matches of note this week. A couple different teams putting 5ers up on the boards.
Yeah, Salt Lake did it too. Right?
Yeah. So Salt Lake, last match of the weekend, defeating Houston 5-2. Another hat trick on board there with Javier Morales, the Real Salt Lake designated player, bagging his first hat trick of the season. New England, the other team to put up a 5 spots, they dropped it on a team I was not expecting them to drop it on.
No one was expecting this one.
And that's Western table-topping leaders, Seattle Sounders.
I don't know what's more surprising, the fact that Seattle gave up 5 goals, or the fact that they didn't score any themselves.
Well, they scored a goal. The first goal was an own goal
on
themselves, from Chad Marshall.
Good job, Chad.
Yeah, way to go, Chad. That's what you get for leaving the crew, you jerk. But no, I think that was definitely something you wouldn't expect that from a side that's been kind of like freely scoring of late. But in that game, Diego Fagundes scored a brace for New England. New England now sits second in the table in the East. They're doing pretty well, exceeding expectations this season. But I think we really need to fast track naturalizing Diego Fagundes because it's not going to be long until that guy gets sucked up for Mexico. His mom's Mexican, so we could easily see him.
We got to beat him to the chase.
Yeah, we got to beat him to the chase. So can someone get on that real quickly? We seem to have no problem getting other players naturalized recently. So, maybe just start gracing those wheels a bit.
I think we're still trying to finalize things with that Ethiopian that plays for Arsenal.
Yeah.
I think he's priority number 1 at this point.
Gideon Zalalem. Yeah. And it sounds like he is going to end up getting naturalized. So
yes.
So those were the other 2 kind of big scoring matches of the weekend. Other ones worth noting, Portland tied it up at home with LA in injury time to salvage a point there. DC United, another team that's been really hot in the East, getting a 1-0 win over Philadelphia at home, courtesy of our friend of the blog and Wrong Inside the Pond in general, Chris Rolfe. So good to see him back in the scoring. And then a few games in the midweek worth watching. Toronto finally got back on track with a 2-1 win. Houston bagged the first win of the week over Columbus despite getting battered by Real Salt Lake. Bad week for Columbus, though.
Yeah, 2 losses that you could have seen a lot going other ways.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you're talking tight 1-0 matches.
And they both were tight. And it's not. It wasn't as
Columbus in that first half against Houston had several opportunities,
but
some of them squandered by the ref not knowing what offsides is.
Mm-hmm. But I do think it's concerning for the Crew that the goals have dried up for them again. That was kind of the big thing about Berhalter was that he was going to open up the scoring for them.
And now everything's talking about bringing in a striker.
Yeah, and I don't think. That was a concern that I think the Crew didn't address in the summer, and relying on Arrieta has never been something that I felt entirely comfortable with. He's not got a great scoring record both in MLS and internationally, so I think it's about time that they start looking at secondary options there as well. So, bad few days in a row for Columbus. They had 3 games in 7 days. Definitely looking a little leggy in that last match on Saturday night. Against Vancouver. It is worth noting in the Vancouver game that they were knocked back by a spectacular Eric Hurtado goal. If you haven't seen that one, go out and take a look at it. It's a blast from outside the 18. Another one of those lines of we're starting to finally see good goals in MLS again.
Yeah, so. It was exciting to watch unless you were rooting for the Crew.
Yeah, which unfortunately, I was.
Yeah,
So.
thanks, yeah.
Other than that, though, I think the thing that's kind of worth noting is the MLS standings are a lot of teams beating up on one another right now. No one aside from a couple teams in each conference really pulling ahead. We're seeing Sporting Kansas City, last year's champions. They're starting to really pull out in the East. And then out in the West, we're seeing Seattle and Real Salt Lake kind of rise to the cream of the crop there. But aside from that, everyone else is kind of just pipping points from one another. So I think it's going to be a summer where we see a lot of that this year. Not a whole lot of dominance within the league. And I wouldn't be shocked that when we resume things come the fall, that we could very well see those two teams at the top of their tables still.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we could definitely see a table that looks pretty similar to what we see right now.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
I would not be shocked at all.
No.
So,
anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth noting in Spain, Real Madrid are now out of the title race after losing today, but it has come down to the final match of the season. The winner take all between Barcelona and Atletico Madrid next weekend. I think that will be a spectacular match to watch, and with no Premier League there clouding up your weekend, that'll probably be the only match really worth watching next weekend.
Yeah, the FA Cup.
Yeah, but it's the FA Cup.
But it's the FA Cup.
Yeah, okay, it's the FA Cup.
Yeah, juggernauts like Arsenal and Hull.
Yeah. So hopefully Hull can find some form and keep Arsenal's real title drought running, just so we have something else to knock them back.
I mean, if Arsenal can't win against freaking Hull in a title game.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Good Lord.
That's very true.
They deserve every bit of crap they have coming their way if they can't pull that off.
Yeah. Also, some great pictures that made it around of Bayern Munich celebrating their Bundesliga title.
Yeah, a few interesting moments there. You had
Pep Guardiola getting blasted with a shot of beer.
Yeah.
It's traditional in Germany, of course, for them to pour beer all over one another.
Those giant boots, glass boots.
Huge, jugs of water or beer that they're pouring on one another. And Guardiola did a kind of...
For a Steiner for everyone.
Yeah. Did an interesting celebration with it. So...
and then he also dropped the trophy.
Yeah, he did drop the trophy, too. So hopefully that's not a symbolic kind of thing.
One, so it might have rolled away from him.
Juventus, they ended up winning the Italian title this past week.
That's so surprising.
Yeah, so surprising. As well in France, where super rich PSG, who are also getting spanked by financial fair play, they also rolled away with the title there. So that just really leaves us with a few minor cups here and there to wrap up. Well, and the Champions League final and the Europa League finals.
The German Cup final will be fun.
Yeah.
Bayern Munich and Dortmund.
Yeah.
That'll be a decent watch.
Shouldn't be too bad. So lots of football still on, of course.
Champions League final at the end of the month.
Yep.
You want to throw a prediction out right now?
I'm going to go with Real Madrid. I think they're going to finally get La Decima.
I think Atletico Madrid stuns them.
Okay.
I think they get the stunner.
All right. Let's put a beer on that one.
Okay.
That'll work. Cool. Well, like we said, this is our last episode of the season.
Yeah.
We will be back with some sporadic World Cup updates.
Potentially some of those being shot
on Fountain Square.
Yeah.
Downtown. Ahead of the U.S. World Cup games. We want to plug that one more time before we get out of here. Of course, Jeremy and I will be emceeing those events down on Fountain Square for all the U.S. games during the World Cup. So
I was just going to let Amy do all of it and drink most of the time. But well, I guess we can MC it, too.
Yeah, we could drink and MC it, I think.
Yes. I guess there is nothing holding us to not doing that.
Yeah. So if you're going to be anywhere near Cincinnati, definitely try to make it out for that. I think it's going to be an awesome affair. Potentially one of the largest watch parties in the country. So come out and drink some beers with us and watch the U.S. And maybe listen to a podcast and live in person. But we'll talk about the World Cup groups at the time, maybe give you some quick updates on what's going on domestically. But then, of course, we'll be back again in the fall for our second season. Pick this back up. New song and dance.
Some more bad preseason predictions.
Yeah, so you can see how bad we'll look this time next year. So, many thanks to everyone who's listened so far. It's been awesome doing this.
It's been a good first season.
Yeah.
It is so far netted us a job.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's netted me a second job as well.
That's right, yeah. You haven't been able to announce that one yet, have you?
Haven't been able to announce it yet, so I got another cat to let out of the bag. We won't be doing it podcast-wise, but you'll certainly be hearing about it through all sorts of social media channels. So, but thanks again, and we look forward to having you guys listen again this time in the fall.
All right, folks.
See ya.
Bye.